Welcome to Part 2, the Title I Educational Stability Provisions, Ensuring Educational Stability and Success for Students in Foster Care. Just a quick reminder, my name is Matt Butensky. I'm a project manager at the Center for Schools and Communities, and I also serve as the Pennsylvania Department of Education's State Education Agency foster care point of contact. And I'm joined by my colleague and co-presenter today, who please reintroduce yourself again for everyone that might not have attended yesterday.
Absolutely. I just want to thank everybody for joining us yesterday and today. It's a lot of information. I am Dawn Trail. I am coming to you from our Bureau of Policy, Programs, and Operations, the Division of Policy. I sit as a Human Services Analyst for the Division of Policy, and I am named the State Child Welfare Education Point of Contact. And education is one of my subject matters that I hold at the state.
Thank you, Dawn. And so what are we going to be looking at today as the follow-up from yesterday? So in part 2, we're going to be picking up with where we left off, talking about best interest determinations. So best interest determinations are a heart of the school stability process, and so we want to spend more time talking about BIDs today. We'll also be looking at school of origin transportation, so reviewing things like transportation plans and other resources and requirements that we have here. Also discussing immediate enrollment and records transfers. And then we'll be wrapping up our part of the presentation today, talking about dispute resolution and contact. So navigating those scenarios where we need a little bit, we need some work to find a resolution, right, and work together. So that will be our main focus of today's training. And then at the end of, or towards the end of our training today, I previewed this yesterday, we will be welcoming our friends from the American Bar Association Center on Children and the Law, who work very closely with the state of Pennsylvania on foster care education-related topics, and they will be sharing about their Pennsylvania Education Barriers Project, including resources they have, and also that they're seeking a new county to work with. So we look forward to hearing from the ABA at the end or towards the end of our training later this afternoon. We wanted to revisit this slide. We had some follow-up questions in the chat and also a few in our inboxes after our part 1 yesterday. So we just wanted to be very clear about the definition of foster care and who this work includes. So I'm going to let Dawn review that with us as we get started.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, yesterday we did talk about the statutory and regulatory requirements that really bring us here today. Again, I want to stress a little bit that we're speaking from the updated non-regulatory guidance. There has not been any changes to the laws or the regulations at this time. So we just want to come back to this space because we were discussing what is the definition of foster care, aside from the 24-hour substitute care out of their home of origin. So we're looking at placement into a foster home of relatives, and this is in the space that we wanted to stop and pause, formal kinship care. The reason why we're looking at the formal kinship care is, one, you're looking at informal versus formal for child welfare. We're looking at if a child is in agency custody under a court order, they are placed in a foster home that could be kinship. And if it's kinship, there is the question of whether or not they are paid or unpaid. If they are paid, it becomes formal kinship care. And if it's unpaid, it becomes informal. And Matt will kind of touch on that informal section in a second. There's also, for the clarity of conversation, and when we speak both languages of child welfare and education, we really want to highlight that informal care is also when there's no child welfare intervention. When a family is in their own space and they're putting one of their children, maybe with an aunt, for whatever reason they find fit, that can also be considered informal care. So, but that's not the same as when there's a court intervention with the child welfare agency and there's the paid versus unpaid. There are counties, because I love that we are county administered, there are counties that do take that space of it may be formal, it may be informal, but we're still going to do a bit. So I want to just highlight that it is become a county-specific situation if there is an informal kinship care placement, meaning the foster home is not asking to be reimbursed and is not getting a stipend.
Mhm. Right.
Matt?
Yeah, so thank you. And then there could be circumstances where students in informal kinship care arrangements or where there's no court involvement or child welfare agency involvement at all, so just an informal arrangement altogether, where they might qualify for McKinney-Vento program eligibility. And that's something that your school would want to inquire with your regional ECYH office with. We were introduced to those regional offices yesterday that mirror those for foster care. So reach out to those contacts at the regional offices to help navigate if an informal kinship care arrangement may qualify under McKinney-Vento. We also had some questions in the chat about 1306 and students that are placed in residential facilities. We are going to be talking more about that shortly, but just a reminder that those students do receive the protections if they are under placement and care responsibility of a child welfare agency, and some of those placement settings are listed there. So we wanted to pick up with that. Throughout the session today, you can always refer to references to the non-regulatory guidance or source law, and you'll see that in those banner boxes at the bottom of the slide. So you can take a screenshot of that or quickly type some of that information into your chat throughout the training. All right, so where we left off yesterday, we discussed the best interest determination process, or we introduced the key concept of a BID. We discussed key questions to develop your local BID process, and I do have a handout that I'm putting into the chat right now that includes all of those questions that were on those slides that reviewed things that when you want to determine or build out your best interest determination process more, these are questions that you're going to want to work with your county agency, work with your schools to really flush out your BID process. So questions around leadership and roles, timing and frequency, when you're going to review BIDs, all of those important factors when really filling in your best interest determination process. I had also mentioned that we're in the process of creating a template similar to what a template for the transportation plans look like that will help you sort of navigate and map out your BID process. But in the interim, please feel free to use these key questions as good conversation and discussion points for rounding out your policies around best interest determinations.
So while you're downloading that and considering those key questions, we wanted to start off today with bringing back to light a little bit of where we left off yesterday. What factors should we be considering when completing the best interest determination process? So the answer would obviously be, we want to sit down and find all the information. We want to know the appropriateness of the current educational setting. Yeah, and finding that information out is key to sitting down and engaging in that meeting. The proximity to the school in which the student is enrolled in at the time of placement is also a very large contributing factor. So these are different spaces that we want to work through and talk about when we're considering completing that best interest process. So when we're looking at the process, again, we want it to be student-centered. We want student-centered because it is meeting the child in their needs in that space at that time. Very context specific. This is also information that can be located in the non-regulatory guidance. Matt has been able to put in the page and what factors to consider.
Yeah, and so these factors are very closely mirrored to what we have on our state issued best interest determination school placement form. So I know many of you use that form, or you've used that form to create more local templates or forms for your best interest determination procedures. But those factors are built into the state issued form, which you can find at that bit.ly link, which reviews those student-centered factors. So we want to be very clear that costs or burden are not a component of the best interest determination process. So just a reminder, transportation costs should not be considered when determining a student's best interest. Similarly, administrative burden for educational agencies or child welfare agencies should not be considered when completing a best interest determination process. So we do receive questions about costs related to transportation, about tuition related costs, and just a reminder that while we understand that those are things that you'll need to work through, they are not components of that bid school placement form that we just discussed being issued from PDE and DHS and the Center for Schools and Communities. So we have a question and answer on our next slide. And the question is, must a student in foster care remain in their school of origin while LEAs, in collaboration with child welfare agencies, complete the BID process? And the answer is yes. To ensure educational stability, a student in foster care must remain in their school of origin until the LEA, in collaboration with the child welfare agency, completes the BID process and determines that it is in the student's best interest to attend a different school. So we talked about this a great deal yesterday, but always that presumption that the student's going to remain in their school of origin. And schools and agencies are making efforts to maintain their school stability in the interim of those final determinations being made. This work is all about limiting educational discontinuity, right? So we want to make sure that we have practices in place for the short term and also the long term to help with that limiting that disruption. That being said, I also just want to note, so again, we're not disenrolling students from schools during the interim of a best interest determination. So I wanted to make that note about enrollment as well.
So Adam did put a question into the chat for us to address about minimizing foster parents transferring foster youth prior to having the best interest determination meeting. This would be a space where you would want to, the child welfare agency and the LEAs would really want to have conversations in regards to who is responsible for that enrollment paperwork. If you have a foster parent who is familiar to your district, utilizing that information and saying, okay, we're going to hit pause and we're going to go to our administration and see what additional conversations might have happened or might be happening. And Matt, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I would just say again, obviously the education, what we're doing here is important. So it's very important for agencies to communicate with foster care providers that are training foster parents or in other venues that foster parents be aware that students have a right to school stability. We obviously, myself and Dawn, we feel very strongly about providing school stability. So as Dawn said, if a student is being presented for enrollment, it's okay to take a slight pause to say, oh, has school stability been considered? Have we thought about keeping the student in their school of origin? So sometimes we hear, oh, well, are we denying enrollment? And that's not really the question. The question is, are we looking at, is it in their best interest to stay at their school of origin? So I would just say continue education with foster care parents, make sure they're aware of school stability. We'll keep that in mind as well as we develop resources that could be shared with foster parents. And then also, again, enrollment staff can reach out to their school's foster care point of contact if a student is presented for enrollment by a foster parent, and we're kind of questioning, was school stability, was it considered? Okay, so we're moving into a scenario that is updated or provided in the updated non-regulatory guidance. And we want to be clear and make this important note that in most cases, or typically, if the student does not remain in their school of origin, the student will enroll immediately into the new school where their foster care placement is located. So this is what will occur in most cases. However, we want to make a note that participants of the bid process must presume that remaining in the school of origin is in the student's best interest unless the bid suggests that attending another school, including any public school the student has attended previously, is in the student's best interest. So we're gonna break that down over a scenario because it sounds like a very long sentence. So we are gonna break that down. But we want to be open-minded that it may be in the student's best interest to consider a prior school entity that the student was enrolled in. Like I said, in most cases, the student will likely either stay in their school of origin that they're currently attending or enroll into their new school of foster care residence, but there might be scenarios where it makes sense to look at a prior school. I sort of previewed this yesterday, and so we're going to look at what a scenario might be for that work. And with that, the scenario is, when might it be appropriate to consider a public school that the student previously attended? So the scenario is, a student lives in a group home and is attending the local public school. The student could not remain in their school of origin because of the proximity from their placement. Now the student is moving to a new placement in a neighboring school district. The new placement is near a previous public school of attendance or school of origin. Due to the reasonable proximity, it may be appropriate to consider enrollment at a prior school. This would be determined through a formal best interest determination meeting. So again, this is a scenario when we're thinking about looking at a previous school because it's just in the student's best interest. I was working with a school district, a few school districts last week with one of our regional offices, and the student was originally attending school district A and then was enrolled next in two additional school districts for very short periods of time. I believe one was about 2 weeks. They changed foster care placements again. They moved again, and they were in another school for 1 week and attended school for a week there. And then they moved back to the original. So in that case, it made sense to have the student in their kind of original school of origin because of how short of time the student was attending those next step schools of origin that they had enrolled into for brief periods of time. So Dawn, you have a few other takeaways for that case.
Yes. So when we're looking at the appropriate considerations, what are things that we might want to include? So as Matt had mentioned, there could be a few school scenarios that had very minimal contact or minimal days enrolled. So we're looking for the bigger picture. Remember, we're looking for educational stability in its definition of our peer engagement, our relationships, our attachments to within our community. So we're looking at, are we having those meaningful relationships reconnected? Could we attach to a prior school that a child was doing very well in their educational progress, academic success? Are they knowledgeable of the community? That is another huge space for some of our older youth who do work. And were they working in that community? Could they go back to working in that community while they're at school? So we're looking at that prior relationship and involvement, especially in the space of educational stability.
Right. So we're not asking that you invite every previous school the student has ever attended in a future best interest determination, but we're recommending that you just be open-minded in unique circumstances where it might be in the student's best interest to attend a previously attended school district. So that's kind of why we wanted to share that specific scenario with you. Okay.
So as the scenario highlights, a student living in a residential facility. This is why we're going to place this here. And we had a few people asking about the 1306. So when a student is in foster care and is placed in a residential treatment facility, for the sake of conversation, we're going to highlight some of those definitions out of the foster care definition. You're looking at group home, residential treatment facility. This is your RTFs or medical, congregate care. Sometimes we use that language. Children's Institute. Student institutions are also defined in Child Welfare Social Security Act, but it's also something that is highlighted out of the Pennsylvania School Code. So we're looking at whether wherever they're placed, they have the right to the protections of ESSA. So we are looking at and ensuring the educational stability, including the bid process, including transportation assistance in immediate enrollment. We do understand that when a student goes into a child's institution as defined by the PA school code, that student then becomes coded in the PA school code as a 1306. And that 1306 definition itself that is where the district that the facility is residing in is hosting the education for those children that are there. This also means that they can host the education while they're living there. Department of Education clearly states in their BEC, as the bit.ly is noting you to go to, that a placement doesn't determine the education entity. When you're looking at a facility placement, you are not to look at the education that is included into that. That's the bundling of service. We do not do that. You really want to reflect on, is this youth going to the public school building, educated on site, or something other? Additionally, you're looking at best interest determinations for students with IEPs. There's a very unique turn-off things that we talk about during best interest determinations. Are they placed in a facility? Are they a 1306? Do they have an IEP? How does that look? What should we be addressing? So when Matt and I were discussing these slides in this conversation, we did meet with the Bureau of Special Education because we wanted to make sure that we were highlighting the very instances that they're seeing, and that we can make sure that we can highlight for the team across the state. So when you're looking at a best interest determination for a student with an IEP, that determination is not looking at the IEP meeting. You are looking at the student's enrollment and attachment to their school of origin or a new school entity. It is not the substitute for an IEP meeting. We want to make sure that we highlight that. If you are having an IEP, you've identified a youth with an IEP, and you're going to enter into a best interest determination, the school district may want to bring their IEP team in so that they can engage during the process, but it is not the same as an IEP meeting. Nor is it determining the related special education placement within that LEA. You're looking at comparable services, but you are not making the determination in this space. And the BID may signal the need for an IEP team meeting upon enrollment. That is something that happens. You can identify the need for that and then invite parties to attend that meeting later on. So again, best interest determinations for students with IEPs. The bid process is beginning. You have identified the youth of needing an IEP team meeting or an IEP team notification, making sure that the paperwork is shared, making sure that the IEP team meeting is scheduled. That is something that can happen, but it is, again, not during the best interest determination. The child's special education needs and services should be discussed because you're looking at the very center of the child and their needs and what it is that they are currently being educated with and what can we educate with. But you're determining your educational entity, not the educational placement.
Thanks, Don. And we, as Don said, we are working with the Bureau of Special Education at PDE. We hope to put out some resources in 2026 that are specific to students in foster care receiving special education. Okay, bid participants. So in this next section, we're going to be reviewing the recommended or required participants within the best interest determination process. So I'm going to be sharing the local education agency participants that are recommended for a best interest determination. So from that LEA, the recommended participants are always, of course, the school of origin and also the new school of foster care residents. So participants from these two LEA entities is really important and necessary to hold a best interest determination meeting. This input is gathered by various contacts, probably the foster care point of contact at your school entity. And there's also an important component of making sure that input is gathered from others within the school network. So this might be teachers and school leaders, coaches and mentors, counselors or other school-based mental health professionals, English learner staff members, as Dawn was sharing, special education staff members and providers, and then LEA representatives from the IEP or Section 504 placement team and alternative education placement staff. So while all of those individuals may not participate in a best interest determination meeting, it's important that someone from the LEA is representing interests or information from those parties.
So when you're entering into your best interest determination meeting, you have your local education side and then the child welfare agency. So when the child welfare agency comes to the table, you're looking at a point of contact or however the county has identified their processes and who that and how that is determined. Again, we keep leaning back on co-led process and determinations and policies and practice. Some counties, again, will have one point of contact, and small counties may even have their caseworkers doing those conversations independently. So again, when you're looking at meeting with different counties, you want to make sure that you're in contact with the right person. And Matt has also identified the directory on the pafostercare.org, a great directory to help you find out who it is that you can talk to in each county. Again, you want to, as a child welfare agency is looking to enter into this meeting, there is the process that leads up to it, that engagement with the caseworker or the case manager, however it is determined in the county, making sure that we're having discussions with independent living caseworkers or social workers that are involved with the child in the child welfare agency or in that process. And we do highlight other CCYA administrators. This could be anywhere from the foster placement department. Some counties have truancy departments. Some agencies have a multitude of different options of the way that they license their foster homes as well. So you really want to look at the process as in collecting all the information that you can before you enter into that meeting. So who are the other best interest determination participants that we have identified here? We have bullet printed and asterisked very big participants that we want to make sure that we're engaging during our process. When you're gathering that information, you want to make sure that you're speaking to the student or the child and really engaging with them about what is school for them, and making it very student specific. I know sometimes we talk with students and children and they tell us some random things, but maybe that's a very important piece that connects them to that peer-to-peer or school district in general. You want to look at your education decision maker. This is also a very highlighted asterisk space for those on the call. Your education decision maker is the parent or the legally authorized person that has been identified by the court. And when I say parent, I'm speaking of parent as defined by IDA out of the school codes and out of federal legislation as to the definition of parent. I am highlighting this because for child welfare, parent definition is not the same as a school parent definition. So that is a very big space for us all to sit in as well. But you do want to engage your education decision makers, your students, your parents, future caregivers. If you're looking at a potential foster home, and you want to engage with them in their knowledge of either the child or the school district. We're looking at all of the different, this is not an exhausted list. These are participants that you want to engage with. They do not have to be at the meeting, but you want to engage with. The ones that do have to be at the meeting are child welfare, an LEA, and who else not?
Well, we do strongly encourage that the EDM be invited to participate, and they should be participating in the best interest determination meeting. Additionally, we find it effective for students to participate in meetings, but you may want to carve out a certain time during the meeting for the student to participate. And with that, we want to share that we're currently developing input forms, particularly for the student and also for the EDM, but it could be also shared with other attendees so that we're making sure we do capture their input in the best interest determination process. Feasibly, it is not always possible to have all of these participants participate in a BID. We know that. I see best interest determination threads. It's very difficult to schedule best interest determinations for all of you who do that on this webinar. Thank you. I know it is not easy. So we are developing forms that will help you get their input while they can't physically participate. So I just wanted to note that as well. Okay. So one other item, I know, Dawn, you wanted to talk a little bit more about the education decision maker.
Yes. And I
Continuing on
just
that.
got to take it home, Matt. So we want to make sure that we are ensuring that the education decision maker is invited to contribute or to participate in that best interest determination. Typically, the student's parent is the child's education decision maker. This is under our IDA, our federal regulations for special education. And that child's EDM is responsible for making education decisions on behalf of the student. Under IDA, if the court is appointing so I do see there's a question in the chat regarding parents consistently being MIA and causing delays. If you are to look at Pennsylvania Code Juvenile Rule 1147, this is where you'll see a lot of information regarding education decision maker responsibilities, rules and responsibilities. They are drafted out. What you are looking for is somebody who is invested into the child's education and future and is very knowledgeable about the child in their current situation. Typically, it is the parents, right? They have that educational right, even if they are not living in the home with the parent, they still retain that educational right until the courts curtail that or a surrogate is appointed by a school district. So if a court is appointing an education decision maker, it could be a family member, a foster parent, a guardian ad litem, a court appointed special advocate. Other examples are listed within 1147, but I will highlight that it is not a child welfare agency.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean there will be different opinions on this topic, but if you are experiencing significant delays, as Dawn said, while the natural parent is typically the education decision maker, that might be, and I know that this is a school person with this comment, might have a conversation with the caseworker or the county agency that, it might be appropriate to look at the court assigning a different education decision maker if they are not consistently participating in what you need from an education decision maker. So just want to make that note as well.
And
Um,
education decision making is discussed in every court hearing.
mhm.
So if there is a delay or a situation that needs to be reiterated to the courts during the review hearings or a dependency, at any point during a court case, having that conversation and communicating that with the county is definitely a very key
Yeah,
factor so that they can discuss it in the courts.
yeah. And before we move on to transportation, I did see another question in the chat about a student's age regarding participation in the bid. And again, this really could vary depending on the individual student. The form that we are putting together does have it's multi levels. So there's one for younger students and one for older students because the questions that they would be answering would be age dependent, right? So that is something that we're looking at. Okay. So at this point, is there anything else, Dawn, before we move on? This is sort of our moment of reflection or looking at comments in the chat. Is there anything we did not get to address before we move on to transportation that I did not see?
I don't believe so.
I do see Jeanette had a question. How is the time determined from one placement to another besides an emergency? So I think their question is just relating to when students change foster care placements.
So in a perfect world, child welfare has the ample amount of time to locate and develop a placement. There are situations where there are emergencies. If a placement is not working out, it could be an emergency removal or it could be a 30-day notice.
Sometimes the placements happen faster than we receive the notification. Yes, that is a reality. Running into issues with school districts not understanding the quick enrollment requirements. So we'll come back to that, Andrew, since we do have a section on immediate enrollment and records transfers, and hopefully we address your question during that component. Okay. All right, everyone. So at this point, we are going to move on to our next key concept that we find in the Every Student Succeeds Act. That is School of Origin transportation. So School of Origin transportation is transportation to and from the school in which a child in foster care is enrolled at the time the child enters foster care or experiences a change in foster care placement. So we wanted to start off by just reviewing what are local education agency requirements for School of Origin transportation. So one of the requirements is that LEAs collaborate with the Child Welfare Agency to develop written procedures for arranging, providing, and funding School of Origin transportation. LEAs also have to ensure that transportation is provided promptly and cost effectively. Additionally, to provide transportation, even if the LEA does not offer transportation for other students, and that LEAs must provide this transportation for the entire time a student remains in foster care. So this is sort of a summary of what are LEA requirements for School of Origin transportation for local education agencies. We did want to share some new information that has been shared in the updated non-regulatory guidance. And it includes the areas of academic activities or extracurricular academic activities and then other extracurricular activities. So what are those updates? So the first is for academic activities, and that transportation must be provided to ensure students can participate in school-sponsored academic extracurricular activities that support their success in school. This might include after-school tutoring, summer learning, and academic enrichment programs. LEAs are strongly encouraged to provide transportation for the student to participate in other school activities that occur outside of the regular school day. So just to make that distinction, we have always discussed the importance of extracurricular activities and how they contribute to the school experience, really help students to attach to their school community, right? So we've always encouraged transportation to allow that to take place for students in foster care, even when they are residing in another school district. But we do have clarified guidance that for academic related extracurricular activities, it is required. And for other extracurriculars, sorry, getting a little tongue tangled, it's strongly encouraged that you provide transportation. So thinking about, i.e., sports activities, school clubs, that sort of thing.
So since we're hearing about the school requirements and the school provisions and updates and non-regulatory guidance, we also want to remind our child welfare agencies, you can click on the bit.ly below, it does take you to the bulletin, that the federal and state legislative provisions for promoting normalcy for children and youth in out-of-home placement through prudent and reasonable and prudent parenting standards. And that does include what Matt just spoke about, extracurricular activities, those enrichment, cultural, and social activities that do happen. So a part of our co-led process here today is to point out both provisions on both sides so that we all know that we're here at the same table.
Thanks, Dawn. And we do also want to talk for a moment about appropriate transportation. So this is something new we want to share, and that LEAs in collaboration with child welfare agencies should provide School of Origin transportation to students in foster care that is age and developmentally appropriate. So we just want to make that clear that we're really looking at the type of transportation being offered for a student when it's required for them to stay in their School of Origin. And then also, we want to encourage that transportation be provided within 3 business days of completing the best interest determination process. And if you were with us yesterday, we are going to be sharing throughout this entire training. We're really using a 3 business day model for best interest determinations, transportation, and we haven't gotten to it yet, but also school enrollment, which is full participation in school. Using that 3 business days is really where we would like to see these activities taking place for students in foster care. That's the goal.
So a little bit of the transportation plan that we want to highlight is that short-term and long-term plan strategy. Again, when you're entering, you have a kid that's moved placements or entered into placement, and you have that interim time between getting that bid process initiated, that bid meeting happening, and that outcome. You're looking at your short-term plans, your interim plans. These are conversations that you want to have between entities when there's not a pending situation. These are conversations and strategies, MOUs, that you're having conversations with between school and child welfare. Again, we're county administered. So you're looking at your county dollars that are going into this, or other providers that are able to assist, or the school district's ability to refund or even provide transportation. There's different conversations to be had during non best interest determination process conversations. So you're looking at those long term, short term, and this is providing, arranging, and funding the transportation. There is additional details at the non-regulatory guidance.
So we put together a transportation plan checklist, and we'll be referencing transportation plans shortly as well. But when you're considering what is important to include in a transportation plan, of course, you are discussing arranging, providing, and funding transportation, but then also what are some other important considerations for transportation plans? So things that you're going to want to look at are the parties involved in your transportation planning and what are their roles. You also want to have clear step-by-step protocols for providing transportation short-term and long-term, like Don said. Obviously, we know and have heard well that transportation plan challenges, shortages regarding bus routes, drivers, etc. So really, we want to have plans in place for those short-term strategies as well that will help provide transportation within those 3 business days or something close to that. And this comes to timelines for implementation. So again, maybe that goal of 3 days. What can maybe occur within 3 days? So are you communicating with the child welfare agency? Do they have any short-term strategies that they can provide? And this also then brings us to a cost sharing agreement. So talking about that more as well, but that there is your cost sharing agreement for how the funding of transportation plans will be covered. What available transportation modes are available? So is it only going to be, the yellow bus, or do we have other transportation modes like ride sharing that might be options within your counties? What are some low cost or no cost options? So we know that sometimes those are far and few in between, but there might be existing routes for that are already available that might be a low cost option. So there might be some options there for you to take a look at that you will know better than we do what is available and what are resources within your school entity and in your agency. Also, special education and IEP considerations should be a part of your transportation planning. What are student safety protocols? And then also, like we just mentioned, support for extracurriculars and out of school time and summer learning activities. So please consider those in your transportation planning. Dispute resolution procedures. So if we cannot come to an agreement, how will transportation still be provided? Because even if we disagree, transportation still has to occur for students in foster care. What is our plan for discontinuing transportation when children exit foster care? So yesterday we talked about our recommendation that students receive the benefits for the current school year, but what does any transition planning look like? How will that be? How will that be handled? And then also a plan for when no transportation plan exists, which we realize is a reality, particularly for out of county placements, which occur rather frequently, or out of state placements. And we do have a recommendation for when there is no transportation plan in place. And then also your signature and your review and renewal timeline. So what that looks like is who is required to sign those transportation plans, who's required to review them, and then also when are you going to look at them to see when we might have to revise something that may or may not be working the best that it can be for providing transportation. So this is sort of a quick transportation plan checklist for important components to consider when you are working through your transportation planning.
So when you're looking at your planning process, you're looking at the cost sharing and responsibility model. We are looking at considering the default cost sharing and responsibility model among placing counties, child youth agencies, the school of origin. There is space for the new school of foster care of residents if transportation plan is not in place. These are conversations that we want to make sure that we're having at some point. It's not, again, not to delay our education stability, not to delay our best interest determination outcome, but conversations do need to be had in regards to the transportation. But it is not, if there's a transportation plan not in place, transportation still needs to be provided. We do recommend that agencies adopt a default cost sharing. So that default cost sharing can be 50-50. I believe there are different conversations that are happening across the state. You do want to include the responsibility in your MOUs that you are drafting and creating. But Matt, what happens if there's just not a cost sharing agreement in place?
Yeah, so there is still an LEA requirement under the Every Student Succeeds Act that transportation is provided. So in the absence of a transportation plan, I always, one, ask parties to consider a default cost sharing model like you're sharing about. Typically, I recommend that that's a three-way cost sharing model like you've shared, Don, right? And then in the absence of a plan, the LEA where the student is attending school still has to ensure that they can attend school. So that would be still a required component for the LEA to make sure that the student can get to school, excuse me.
I also want to highlight that there are agreements that have been drafted and made across the state. This would be a great time for entities to revisit those agreements. Are they outdated? I would say take a look at who signed them. Are they still that point of contact? I know there's been a lot of shift in child welfare for points of contact. So this is a good time and good reminder to revisit those previously drafted and entered into agreements. But ensuring education stability, we also do want to give a little reminder that LEAs should establish a transportation plan with any county that they are working with, any county youth and children agency. This could be across the state. We have placement options become very limited in some spaces. So placements can be across the state or even outside the state, which leads us into across PA and across state lines. So we're looking at our inter-LEA or our interstate protocols and collaborations. These are very critical when you're placing a student or a child in different areas of the state and being sure that you are engaging parties across the state. Again, for the directory that is on pafostercare.org, you will find points of contact for across the state for an LEA or a CCYA. And it is also recommended that if you're placing in another county for county agencies, reaching out to that county that you're placing in and having a conversation with how does it work in your county. There is possibility that things look different in placing students in ESSA EID process. Being aware of your interstate compacts in the placement of children outside of the state, being aware of what the other receiving state may charge for education. There are counties in some states that charge, there are counties that don't. Some states charge, some states don't. Being very well aware of what is going to cost your county dollars when placing a child out of state, and what that might even look like for your court conversations. Matt was able to put our interstate compact DHS website on here. There are links on this interstate compact page that you can click on whatever state you are placing with. It is recommended that counties include the education information into the interstate compact paperwork when they're applying.
Hmm. When students are placed out of state, they are placed through the interstate compact. So
Yes.
we just wanted to make that note clear. I know, Dawn, this is a topic that us at the state level we work on with other states, and I know it's something, Dawn, that you've been working on with some other states, and putting together, I think, a Q&A you had talked about in development, working with the ABA on that.
Yes. There
Okay.
are conversations that do come to the state level in regards to a student living in another state. And we do, the first question we do ask is, was this placement done through the interstate compact?
Okay. So moving on, or back a little bit about written transportation plans. So we just want to be clear that public school districts and charter schools must have a written transportation plan in place. So as Don was saying, think about making sure you know where that plan is. If you're a new point of contact or there's been change in leadership at your LEA, you'll want to make sure you have that plan and know where it is. Cyber charter schools, career and technical centers, and intermediate units are not required to have a written transportation plan in place. Again, we talked yesterday about how those students receive the protections, but they are from the sending school. So those students would receive transportation from the public school district or the charter school that they attend. Don,
So
you
in
already
your,
mentioned this a little bit, but yeah,
I
why don't you go
did.
ahead and recap it?
Um, we have new information that we wanted to highlight from the non-regulatory guidance, that transportation plans should be reviewed annually. I know in previous guidance that this was recommended to be reviewed every 3 calendar years, but the more recent information that's being provided to us is that we review it annually.
Right. And we were thinking about building something in how, right now the transportation plan template that most of you use, it actually says on it that you will review it every 3 years. So we're continuing with that recommendation that you get that kind of full signature every 3 years, but really you do want to have eyes on your plan by someone at your agencies annually, because there are a lot of benefits to that. Again, we mentioned change in positions at schools. So I just wanted to note that as you think about that timeline.
So as we're exploring the transportation options, and LEAs are required to have that formal written transportation plan, child welfare should also fully support the LEAs in exploring those full range options and for providing and arranging the funding of transportation. This is consistent with language from the Fostering Connections, and this does include participation in developing and establishing those transportation plans. As you can see below with the bit.ly, this is a insert from the Social Security Act. There is also a requirement that the foster youth that you are arranging the transportation with be a 4E eligible student in order to get the reimbursement for $40.
Thanks, Don. And again, we know that the written transportation plan is a requirement and is for LEAs and is something that is monitored as a part of their Title I Division of Federal Programs monitoring. But we really need and appreciate the support of agencies in order to develop those joint transportation plans, right? So thank you for sharing that.
So I had said this yesterday, and I'm just going to highlight it again. When a child is exiting foster care, again, as you see, it's in the beautiful orange, in the non-regulatory guidance update, strongly encouraged to provide transportation to the school of origin through the end of the school year. This is a recommendation that is provided to schools. I'm highlighting this because the exit from foster care is still a placement change. So that is a conversation that you want to have and highlight with your school districts.
Okay, so just looking briefly at funding responsibilities for transportation, transportation must be provided even if there are additional costs. And additional costs are those above and beyond what the LEA would typically spend to transport a student to their assigned school. There are allowable funding sources for meeting this requirement, and for LEAs, the allowable funding source is Title I, Part A. So you can explore that option, including an optional set aside with those staff at your school entity regarding addressing additional cost of transportation.
And as I had just noted, that for county agencies for reimbursement, you can apply for that under the maintenance payments for your 4E eligible foster children.
There are some other funding sources that you may be able to explore to address the additional transportation costs. So IDEA for students with IEPs requiring transportation may be something that you can explore. For example, LEAs may use special education buses that are IDEA funded for students in foster care if there is no extra cost and it is an incidental benefit. And this derives from the updated non-regulatory guidance. Title IV, Part A may also be an allowable funding source for LEAs. We're not going to go in great detail of what that looks like. There is a funding section in the updated NRG that we had shared and is linked throughout this session in those bit.ly links. We also ask that you consider existing programs that students in foster care may benefit from. So, for example, 21st Century Community Learning Centers, which is our network of out of school time programs here in Pennsylvania. And just wanted to reiterate that students experiencing homelessness are not students in foster care. Okay. And so Title I homeless set aside is not an allowable funding source for local education agencies. School entities in Pennsylvania are required to have a set aside for working with their McKinney-Vento eligible students, but that is not an allowable funding source for students in foster care. We don't have a lot of time, so I want to just kind of briefly look at the chat for a moment to see if there were a few things that we could address quickly before moving on to our final section on immediate enrollment. What I'm kind of summarizing from what I'm seeing in the chat, I'm trying to look while Don, you're speaking, is if there are issues regarding transportation, please contact us. If a school is not providing transportation within a timely manner, if you feel like there's undue delays, please reach out to your regional office that we mentioned yesterday, or reach out to me, and we'll look into that. Likewise, if you're a school district and you're having a lot of challenges regarding identifying transportation, please document your efforts. We always say document your efforts trying to attempt to get transportation. And also, again, we're talking about this work being very collaborative. It's important that you work with the child welfare agency to see what options may exist during those interim periods where you're trying to find or set up transportation. I know a lot of agencies do that, and they do provide interim transportation for sometimes long periods of time. It's not very interim, but just document those efforts to identify transportation, or if there are issues, please reach out to us as well. Is there anything else that we should address, Dawn, that you see?
The school district, if they're not providing transportation to after school activities for all other students, does that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I did see that question. That's one I'm going to have to go back and look into a little bit more. I have a few thoughts in my head regarding how the law does require transportation be provided, even if a school does not traditionally provide transportation. That specific information in the guidance is related to school day, is related to the school day. So I have to go back and I'll get back to you, Danielle. I can reach out to you with the information you registered with to clarify that question. All right, well, we'll take a look at the Q&A from both parts of the webinars and see if there's anything that we need to address with everyone. But in this last section on the Title I school stability requirements, we're going to be reviewing immediate enrollment and records transfers.
So we want to highlight the key concept of immediate enrollment and records transfers is that during the bid process, that indicates that the student will change schools. So you have an outcome it is indicated that it is in the best interest that the student child change school districts. The local education agencies must ensure that the student in foster care is immediately enrolled in the new school. During your best interest meeting, it is best to have that conversation as to how that enrollment paperwork should look and who will be completing that paperwork. County agencies can complete that paperwork.
So documentation that is typically required for enrollment cannot prevent immediate enrollment of a student in foster care. That being said, once a student is enrolled, the enrolling school must contact the student's school of origin for relevant records.
Matt, I just want to take a second here to also identify that paperwork may not be required in that moment and it cannot prevent enrollment. County agencies should also be working diligently with the LEA, the enrolling school, to ensure any type of documentation that is needed is getting to them in a timely manner.
Thank you. Yes, and we do know that while missing paperwork cannot prevent immediate enrollment, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be working, as you just said, Dawn, to get the paperwork after the student is enrolled into school. We still want to have complete academic records for students in foster care. So this would be a process that is continuous and ongoing. So something that we heard a lot in 2016 when the law was passed was, what does immediate mean? So we do have a clear definition of immediate enrollment. And immediate means that a student is fully enrolled as soon as practicable. And in most cases, students should be fully enrolled within 3 business days. So mentioned that earlier, please go off that 3 business day kind of rule across the board. That's our recommendation. And what this means is full enrollment means that the student is attending classes and participating in activities and services, not just on a school roster. So sometimes we see a student is enrolled on paper, but they're not fully participating in school. We really want to make it clear that students should be fully enrolled in school, meaning they're fully participating in activities and classes. And then when students do transition to their new school, we want to, minimize as much disruption as possible, or is as feasible when they are transferring to a new school. Regarding prompt records transfers, the school of origin is strongly encouraged to transfer records within 3 business days to minimize disruption. So when we are looking to transfer records, again, going back to that 3 business days, for when that should take place. Very important that you establish who in your school entity is responsible for that, who's getting notified in order to do that. I know many of you have already set up those policies for how that actually takes place, but something you want to keep in mind. Some records to request between school entities would include immunization and health records, also academic transcripts and class histories, attendance records, and then IEP or Section 504 plans if it's applicable.
So when we're looking from the child welfare agency in regards to information sharing, there is limitations on what can be shared and what should be shared. So agencies are to be utilizing some type of notification process that has been co-developed by them and the LEA that they are working with. DHS does have a placement notification form that is accessible online for anyone. That is the bit.ly below. If this is a form that can be downloaded and utilized by any entity. A court order is not a relevant academic record. We do want to highlight that court orders are not to be sent unredacted. should not be a request from a school district to an LE or to a county agency in regards to this notification of placement. There have been many conversations. I know there was something yesterday asking about the USA form notification requirement. A call, as per PD, a phone call is notification. If you need to have documentation, that is a co-developed conversation between yourself and the LEA or the county. Those conversations are very critical. We do not want to share information that is unnecessary to be shared. And that is definitely a large standing point for the county agencies, and there was guidance that was released to county agencies regarding notifications.
So we know that students in foster care frequently have missing academic history based on their high mobility. So it's really essential that the student's academic history is thoroughly investigated. And this might include requesting prior records from more than one LEA. And so we really wanted to share this today because we wanted to acknowledge and recognize Act 1 of 2022, which is for students experiencing education instability. And so any student in foster care enrolling in a new school would also be eligible for Act 1 of 2022. We have more information on our website as well as PDE's website on Act 1. You could find that at act1edinstability.org. But we really want to make sure we're addressing the full academic picture and academic history for students in foster care, and that includes their eligibility for Act 1. Had already addressed this, but after immediate enrollment, can the enrolling school still require standard documentation? Yes. Once the student is enrolled, the enrolling school should gather any outstanding records or standard enrollment documentation. However, this process cannot delay students from fully participating in school. So we just wanted to make that clear.
So education records sources. This was a slide that we felt that was definitely needed. Prior to school entities, both prior to school entities and placing CCYAs are sources to obtain relevant school records. Relevant school records can be information from residential treatment facilities, intermediate units, alternative education placements. However, relevant records that can be considered and reviewed by the county agency, but not directly released, would be relevant medical, disability, or health information, information in psychological evaluations, if only if it is relevant to the child's care and need in the educational setting. This is definitely a space where we do not want to overshare. I think Missy had posted some guidance tools and templates. pafostercare.org has additional information there regarding information sharing 101.
Thanks, Dawn. So with that, to wrap up immediate enrollment and records transfers, we just want to share that LEAs should review and revise any enrollment policies that may impede immediate enrollment and prompt record transfers. So I did see some comments in the chat, and I'm going to address those later on when we have a moment and type some responses. But we also just want to make clear that this includes accounting, billing, and tuition and reimbursement policies. So these cannot impede immediate enrollment for students in foster care. And with that, again, like I had mentioned, I did see some comments in the chat. We'll address that later on in the presentation, but I want to move on quickly to our dispute resolution and contact section. So Dawn, if you want to get us started with that.
Absolutely. I think dispute resolution might answer a lot of the questions that are in the chat. So our statewide and regional offices do offer support for disputes that arise and are strongly encouraged to be dispute resolution policy procedures at the local level. What does that mean? LEAs and county agencies should be preparing a dispute resolution process internally with each other, a co-led process. This would be areas that we see a lot of, that we've talked a lot about, would be the best interest determination. If the LEA or the county agency disagree in the appropriate school for the student in foster care to be attending, that would be an area for dispute resolution. School enrollment. If there's a disagreement that occurs, whether a student should be immediately enrolled or if there's a delay in enrollment. There was a few different questions in the chat yesterday and today regarding that. Dispute resolution conversations should be happening around transportation. If there's a conflict on how or who pays the transportation, that should also be drafted out in your local level dispute resolution procedures. So we're looking at our procedures. Your local transportation plans is ideally where you would include your dispute resolution procedures. Again, if these have not, there's no dispute resolution procedures within there, great time to review those, update those. If they are 3 years out of date, also a great time to update those and add in a dispute resolution process. When developing the procedures for conducting best interest determinations, LEAs and CCYAs should also determine a dispute resolution in that space for when an agreement on the best interest cannot be made. This also is act promptly, fairly, always putting the child first. The educational stability is what is the purpose of our conversations. And these procedures should also highlight that the student is to remain in their school of origin while any dispute is being resolved. So there are consider the procedures when financial disagreements do occur.
Yes, as we have seen in the chat, there are sometimes financial disagreements, and so your dispute procedures could include that element as well. So importantly, when you're looking at putting together dispute processes in any of those 3 areas, what are the procedural items that you want to make sure you include? So you want to include your timeline for resolving disputes. So ideally, within 3 business days, you would resolve your dispute. Within the dispute process, you want to maintain clear and ongoing communication with all the parties. This could include obviously other entities like your regional offices, other staff at your school or agency, or myself or Dawn at the state level. You also want to think about highlighting or naming decision makers at each agency to lead resolution efforts. So rather than have lots of different people everywhere, really think about who are the decision makers at your agency to help resolve these disputes. Also think about how you're going to include other stakeholders, such as inclusion of administrators within your school entity or agency, or the solicitors at your school entity or the solicitor for your county agency. We really want to emphasize considering fairness. We talked about, the spirit of considering default cost sharing methods, but really just consider fairness when thinking about dispute resolution procedures. And then always, as I had mentioned, collaborate with statewide and regional offices to help you navigate and resolve disputes.
So when you're looking at your dispute resolution, you also want to look at that final decision maker. A few different questions come through the chat. Who would that be? So ESSA in Fostering Connections, they do not designate a final decision maker. There is a purpose for that. The essence of the law is that we are working together with a child-centered focus and being able to come to the table with a outcome that is in the best interest of the child. But in the event that you have a final decision maker conversation in the dispute resolution, there's the new guidance that says that the dispute resolution procedure should identify a specific party or agency as the final decision maker in the best interest process. And again, you have to remember for students with disabilities in foster care, that placement decision must adhere to the relevant education, special education requirements under IDA.
Mm-hmm. And just a reminder, Dawn, as we've been saying this throughout the last 2 days,
we have to ensure continuity of education. No, avoiding the uninterrupted unnecessary educational disruptions, and that students in foster care must remain in their school of origin while any dispute is being resolved.
Right, as that's always my first question when I get an email about a dispute or a call about a dispute. I always ask where the student is. Are they remaining in their school, their current school? So that's always the first question. Okay, so we do have a few strategies to go over quickly to help you avoid disputes because that's our goal. We don't want to have disputes. So, first of all, having regular opportunities to collaborate will help you avoid disputes before they arise. We talked about sustainable collaboration yesterday, having a biannual meeting, having a quarterly meeting. So, when you have regular opportunities to plan these different steps, you don't have disputes frequently. They're very infrequent. Maintaining clear formal policies and procedures for any agencies you work with, keeping decision making child centered and best interest focused in absence of defined policies. So, again, I will always ask entities, are you using a school placement best interest determination form like the one that the state has issued to review those child centered factors for best interest? Or are we talking about tuition costs? Are we talking about transportation costs? Again, those are not child centered factors and they're not best interest focused. This also refers to using the state issued tools rather than local models when collaborating outside of normal jurisdictions. So the reality is we have to work across different counties, across different regions, across different states. So in those cases, we hear, oh, we do it differently in this county. Well, in circumstances where you do it differently, we would encourage you to use the state issued tools as sort of like a common ground form to use for those out of county or out of state placement sort of situations. Maybe not out of state because the state might a different state's going to have something different. And then just being collaborative and flexible again in that spirit of fairness and being collaborative. Agree to things like a default cost sharing model in absence of plans and when disputes arise. So it's really just about keeping conversations child centered and just really being collaborative. And when all else fails, if you have concerns about ensuring educational stability, please reach out to the state or PDE regional foster care offices for assistance immediately. We don't like hearing about things going on for long periods of time. You can always reach out to us for assistance and we will help you navigate your disputes. So when all else fails, please contact us. And with that, I am now happy to introduce for our final 10 minutes, the American Bar Association. I want to ensure you have some time to talk about the Education Barriers Project and on a really positive note, right? So I'm going to see if Carolyn, there you are, Carolyn. I'm going to go ahead. Thanks for being here and let you go ahead and share your screen. You could take over the screen share from me and get us going. How are you?
Hello, good. All right. I am trying to share my screen. I think that Matt, you might need to stop sharing.
Okay.
Thank you. It's good to be here with everyone. I'm here with my colleague, Emily Peeler. Okay.
Hi everyone, Emily here. I'll be hanging out in the chat and dropping links. Thanks, Carolyn.
Thanks, Emily. Can everyone see that screen okay? All right, perfect. So my name is Carolyn Lip. Emily and I work at the ABA Center on Children and the Law. And we're here to talk about the Education Barriers to Permanency project. We know that this is a lot of information that you've been hearing over these past couple of days, and we hope you are feeling energized to turn this great information and this guidance into practice. So we have a project designed to do just that. It is funded by OCYF to be a free resource to counties, so to help counties support the education stability and success of students in foster care. And so as I mentioned, we work at the American Bar Association Center on Children and the Law. We're a national nonprofit based out of Washington, D.C., and there are many different projects that we have here at the ABA to support children and families who are impacted by the child welfare system. But Emily and I are part of the Legal Center for Foster Care and Education. So we work at the national level. We also work at the state level. We do a lot of work with the state of Pennsylvania. And we work at the county level. So this project that we're talking about is a county type of project where we do really intensive work at that local county level. Just to give you a sense of the scope of our work, we also facilitate national networks of advocates and state leaders who support students in foster care. And we provide technical assistance across the country. So we would really encourage you to check out our website. And I think Emily will drop the website into the chat if you want a starting point. We really aim to be just like a centralized source of information about the education rights of children in foster care. So the goal of the Education Barriers Project is that school stability is really connected to placement stability and to permanency. So we believe that by supporting the educational stability and success of children in foster care, we can actually reduce the length of time that children spend in foster care and promote lasting reunification and permanency outcomes. We also believe that school success guides life success, and that school stability is really the foundation, not just about academic success, but setting children in foster care up for life success after they become adults. And then we also believe that child welfare agencies and schools and courts have a role and really have to work together to support students in care. And speaking of collaboration, I know Dawn and Matt spoke yesterday about sustainable collaboration, which we love that term. And the Education Barriers Project really takes a collaborative approach. So we work to bring everyone who supports children in foster care together. And one of the challenges that we really do see across the country is people working in silo. So child welfare agencies at one end, school districts on the other end, and they're both doing great work, but they're not communicating and not working well together. But we know that to succeed in deep, meaningful change, we need to do more than just work with one system. We need to bring them both together. And that also has to be with the involvement of key stakeholders. So lawyers, advocates, judges, CASA, and then, of course, youth themselves and families and caregivers have to be part of this work to create meaningful change. So the first part of the Education Barriers Project is making sure that we have buy-in from all of those key stakeholders and both the school system and the child welfare agency on board to really do this meaningful work to create change for students in care. So now let me get into the weeds of what the project actually does. So once we have that buy-in, the first stage of the project is identifying the strengths and challenges in your county. So this project is so tailored to a specific county. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. So right now we're working in Lancaster County. We've previously worked in Westmoreland County. And both of those projects have evolved in different ways because the first step is going into the county and really trying to understand what's happening. So we do that by reviewing case files, we conduct focus groups, interviews, we observe court hearings, and then we look at those written policies and procedures. And then we develop an initial report where we reflect back to you all about what we're hearing and seeing is happening in your county. And then the next phase of the project is about these next three buckets. So it's about developing strategies, practices, and policies, and that's happening through a multidisciplinary collaborative process. We're collectively coming up with a work plan and priority areas. We're providing targeted technical assistance, and then we're collaborating on a long-term strategy. So the goal is to make these changes sustainable so that after the ABA leaves, and if there's staff turnover within the county of county leaders, these changes are really lasting and not just a short-term change. And then the project ends with us doing the same kind of intensive data collection and observations that we did at the beginning of the project. And then we report out on the changes we've seen and the improvements we've seen. And the project usually lasts 2 to 3 years. So I know that sounds like an intensive project. It is a very tailored approach. So there are kind of two options. There's like the full education barriers, and then there's Ed Barriers Light. So the full education barriers project is that 2 to 3 year project that involves the data collection, facilitating those collaborative meetings, developing the policies, the resources, the trainings, doing that final data collection. It's more of a formal process, and it is time consuming and intensive. We also have an Ed Barriers Light if you're thinking maybe that kind of time commitment isn't right for my county at the moment. And the lighter version can be anything that your county is in need of help with. So that could be helping to conduct self-assessments. We could help facilitate a work group on a specific topic. We could help you develop a resource or a policy. Maybe you're listening today and you're thinking, we need to update our best interest determination process, or we need to update our transportation policies. These are all things that we can help with. And then we can also provide trainings on various topics. And that's, I think, what we get most requested in the sort of the Ed Barriers Light is to provide trainings. Just to give you an example of some activities, topic areas, and outcomes, these come from Lancaster County and Westmoreland County. What I really want to highlight in the outcomes is that we saw when we did that final data report out from Westmoreland County after being involved for several years, that we had improved court advocacy. So we actually saw education come up in the courtroom more frequently. We saw increased school stability, so a significantly higher number of students were remaining in their school of origin at the end of the project. And we saw improved data sharing, both internally within the agency and then externally between the Child Welfare Agency and schools. You might be thinking, how much does this cost? The good news is that because it is funded by the state, there is zero cost to counties. We're really here to be a free resource. And our director, Kathleen McNaught, and Emily will drop Kathleen's email in the chat, is the person to reach out to if you have any questions, if you're interested in learning more. If you're thinking that we don't quite have the collaboration that we want in our county, that is something that we can work with you on to develop. And then for other community partners, like we said, we typically engage the courts, community nonprofits, CASAs, and then, of course, students, families, and caregivers. Okay, I know that was a lot and really fast. We have different resources. We have our website, which has an overview. We have a one-page flyer, and then we have sort of a two-pager that breaks down these project components. And Matt, I will turn it back to you and see if we have any questions.
Yeah, thanks so much, Carolyn. And I will say, over the last 2 days, we did talk a lot about procedural considerations, thinking about collaboration practices, setting up policies for dispute resolution. So this might be an area maybe in the light version that they might be able to explore with you, see what opportunities might be available in that Ed Barriers Light if they don't want to make that full commitment. So thank you for being such an awesome resource for us. I'm sure Dawn wants to jump in too. We heavily work with the American Bar Association here in Pennsylvania. And so just thanks for all you do. We appreciate you sharing that information. And Emily has been in the chat, getting more information to attendees with questions.
There's Emily in the chat again. I just want to, again, express my gratitude to the American Bar Association for being able to really engage with the counties at their level. And it really is a county-driven conversation in the development of the tools and resources that each county has been very impressive. So impressive that Matt and I are looking at utilizing some of that very hard work that the counties are doing with the ABA at the state level in developing them out into statewide tools that can be tailored to any county. We are a minute over. I'm just going to say my thank yous for everybody for joining us today. If you've taken anything away from our 2 days in our sessions, it is collaboration, sustainable collaboration, long-term collaboration, and being really centered on the education for students in foster care. And I want to thank everybody for being the champions across the state.
Thank you. I echo that. Thank you all for attending. Ben Simmons placed an evaluation link in the chat. Please
All
take
right,
a
let's
moment
head
to do that.
upstairs.
And sure. So have a great rest of your afternoon. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week. And please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions or comments or follow up from these two-part trainings. Thanks all. Take care.
Really quickly, was there an evaluation for yesterday's as well? I didn't see one when we closed.
It's just one link for today.
Okay.
So it's for both parts, I should say. So
Oh.
it's today's link is inclusive of day 1 and day 2. And we'll hang on for a couple minutes. We're past time, but if anybody had any questions that they wanted to address while we're online, I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your week.
Would you guys be willing and able to share the PowerPoint presentation with all of us? Because I think it's a great resource.
Yeah, so the PowerPoint is still going under review at the Department of Human Services, and so
Okay.
after it's approved by Dawn's agency, we can share out the PowerPoint.
Thank you.
And I do know that there was questions regarding the recordings from yesterday and today. Matt and I are in discussion of ensuring that a form of a recording is provided. This again is the same as providing the resource of the slides. We do need to have additional agency approval to post those, but there is no worry. We will reach out to everyone in the state once those are posted and published, and we really are ambassadors of getting this information out across the state. So we love to speak about education and educational stability, and we want to make sure that everybody has the same resources.
Yes, and for those that are still online, as we have talked about putting together procedures, we are very much in support of having regional forums or some county forums for helping you do this work. So if there's any highlights that came out in your mind or sparks that said, oh, I'd love to be able to do this, but I need to get someone to help facilitate conversations, reach out to Dawn or I, and we could think about reaching out to our regional offices if they might be able to support conversations about, helping to convene other schools within your counties and regions to really, lay out these policies and procedures. So keep us in mind for really training and technical assistance support is what I'm trying to say.
Mr. Mudd, are you a holiday elf?
Yes. Well, this is a Christmas tree, actually.
I love it.
Love.
And I have a Christmas tree sweater on too, so I don't know if you guys can see that. But I had a quick question. I didn't see the response in the chat when I asked about the compelling districts to participate that aren't the origin or resident district. And what teeth do we have as to get them to the table? Because I mean.
I did respond to your question, but what I would recommend is, again, noting that there has been no statutory change to the definition of school of origin. So it's possible that you get some resistance because ESSA hasn't changed, the words of the law haven't changed themselves. So I would just take it case by case. If you're getting resistance, reach out to Dawn or myself, and we'll try to I'll try to encourage that school to participate and what are the reasons for them participating. Again, it's going to kind of be case by case. So I would just say reach out, Richard.
Well, so I was, realistically, prior to, we have few and far disputes in our county. So I'm just looking for some responses to mitigate so that I don't have to go to that next level. Or, if I exhaust that, then what?
Then I would just recommend you provide the reasons why it's, I would bullet out the reasons why they're being invited to the best interest determination and why it's not in the best interest to consider, which I'm sure you probably would already do already. But again, like I said, because it's not a clear definition in a statutory law about including, you know, the prior school of origin, you might get some resistance.
So
So,
I'm
Unless
just
Dawn, you have other
briefly.
thoughts.
Rich, the thought that I'm having is that in statutory definitions, nothing is saying that it would exclude that previous school that a child had attended. It really is, the definition is open to a school of origin is the public school a student is enrolled in. When they enter foster care or when they change foster care placements, it doesn't limit the timeframes. I would,
So my concern is how messy it is. There's 44 public school districts in our county. Our team is small, as you guys know. Just, and from the aspect of just the child advocates, maybe they're looking to, push a child into a building or district that they want to. I mean, what's to say it wasn't 3, 4 districts? What's the time frame as far as they're enrolled in the other district? There's a lot to unpack here for me, and I'm sorry that I don't want to take up your time, but I'm just trying to figure this out because I don't know who. I was trying to look to see who was paying attention here on the call. So I know that I'm going to be dealing with this before Christmas, I'm sure.
meaningful relationships, those
Oh,
appropriate considerations, um,
trust me, I get that part.
defining that's the sustainable, conversation. Like you have to really look at that bigger conversation of, is it, are we looking at that as a placement option because it's closer and making it convenient? Or are we looking at that educational entity because they went to school there for 6 months and had the most developed conversations and peers than any other placement that they've ever been to? Like those are those real in-depth conversations. You got to dive below that surface conversation
I get
that
that.
some people have.
But then, so in our department, we don't have that conversation about finances, but that's the first thing that's going to pop up if they're not the neighboring district or
Yeah.
across a river or all over a bridge here, bridge or a tunnel. We're in Pittsburgh.
400 and some bridges.
Yeah, and a fraction of that are districts. Some of these districts touch other counties. I mean, we have. I like to say that we have a very good collaboration with everybody in our county, but I'm cautious here because I know what's coming.
I think that's fine.
Kids get released from congregate care facilities. We do our best to put them back in the district, even if they're elsewhere. But if they're not, if that's not in play, then it's oh, I'm looking for something as a starter point, outside of like you said, the deep dive. I already take the deep dive with every kid, even if they're staying in district. I just need to know. I'm looking for some advice, I guess, because I know this is coming.
I think Dawn's advice was appropriate to share that the definition doesn't exclude a prior school the student attended. So I don't know what other advice I can provide outside of that. And again, outside of saying, um, you know, I'll try to find some other source law information. I could look into that a bit more, Richard, but
Okay.
um, that's all I can really offer on the topic.
We can even take the question to our national, because Matt and I both attend some national conversations, and we can bring it to other states and see if they have anything drafted out.
Yeah, this is ideally, and again, not to go to diverge, but some states have replicated some of this into their own state laws. In Pennsylvania, we don't have anything replicated in state law. So in some states where there have been, gray areas, they've clarified definitions in their own state code. We don't have that here. So again, Dawn and I are operating off of what's in the the words of ESSA, And really, the words in ESSA are about maybe 3 paragraphs. So, we don't have a lot of flexibility to, color definitions of things that aren't in the written statutory requirements. So, but to Don's point, it doesn't exclude another LEA.
And it
So
doesn't stop you as a county administered entity to develop your own with your school districts. What does that look like for you in your school districts? And
that could be a
engaging
part
with
of
your
your
solicitors.
Yeah, that could be a part of a part of a policy around best interest determinations, and we're talking about what your policy is that your what schools they sign on to agreeing to look at prior school, a student's prior school that might not be the current school they're enrolled in, as a school of origin. So that is another option.
But we do hear you when you say, what does that actually look like? And is this going to be a wildfire before Christmas?
It won't be a wildfire before Christmas, but there's going to be some smoldering.
In the essence of the law, you're looking at the child-centered conversation.
Fair enough.
And you are a small team, but you are mighty.
Thank you. That's all I got. Thanks, though.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
And happy holidays.
You too.
Me too. Well, I did not see anything else in the chat.
Yeah.
So,
This is Adam
oh,
again. I just had one more
okay.
kind of like logistical kind of thing. I know, like, I did the evaluation, and I know it offers like for the Act 48 credits, but that wouldn't be appropriate for me and my team members who are on this. Is there a way for us to be able to get some sort of like certificate of attendance that we could then, submit to our people to, maybe just get our credit for attending the training, because we have our usual like 20 hours of training that we have to do every year, and this is
Mhm.
definitely like a really great training that directly impacts our jobs within Philadelphia County, OCYF. So.
Mhm. Yeah, Adam, I did get your email requesting a certificate of
Oh, you did?
attendance.
Okay, great.
So,
I forgot
I
I
do,
sent that.
yep, I have that. And so if your other staff just want to email me as well, we'll work on that. I can't promise that you'll get it this week, but you'll get it
Oh, yeah, I
in
mean, whatever. It's
January.
not an immediate
Sure,
necessity, because
I get
we
it.
go by fiscal year, so we have essentially 6 months.
I think you
So
should get credit. It was 3 hours,
exactly, and
so you
that's our
should.
thing, because we were it was implicitly implied that this was a mandatory training for us, even though they didn't outright say it.
Okay.
But it was great. I mean, because me and my team members do, we are in the Education Support Center part of Philadelphia County's OCYF, and so we work very closely with the Philly School District.
Yes.
And we facilitate the bids and things like that. So this was actually an awesome training. So lastly, I wanted to just thank you guys, because it was very great.
Thanks, Adam.
All right.
Thank
So,
you.
Glad you
all
could
right. So
attend.
I'll reach out to my couple of team members who I know are on here, and just ask them to email you, Matthew, with that question.
Sure. I also saw Kelly, if you could just email me as well about your certificate of attendance request, that would be great. Okay. Anybody else while we're together? All is quiet and all is serene. So, thanks everybody for attending again. And Don, thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you and everyone
You,
else.
you as well. You as
Matt,
well. So,
I'm
oh,
sorry.
okay.
I am a late
Okay.
question. I was
Okay.
trying to get more information. So I had a quick question. I have a,
Okay.
a situation where the student is not yet considered McKinney-Vento, but something happened where they possibly could get evicted from their home.
Okay.
Um, the parent does not know their next moves, and we're trying to figure it out with them. Um, in this situation, if the parent moves out of county, like out of the our county, um, would our we wouldn't help with transportation, but we would just help with like the transition from our county to whatever other school they go outside of our county, right?
So the protections for students experiencing homelessness are very similar. So that student, it sounds like they haven't been identified yet because it's not appropriate to identify them yet. But if they
Right.
are, if your school does find that they qualify for McKinney-Vento, they would have a right to go to continue at your school, or they'd have a right to go to their other school. Um, so it wouldn't just be, it's really up to the student and the family for
Okay.
McKinney-Vento. There really isn't a best interest determination process for
Right.
students experiencing homelessness. Doesn't look the same. So it's really student choice in that circumstance. So, but
Okay.
when that occurs, where are you from?
We're in region 1 in
Oh, Region 1.
Philadelphia. Yeah.
Are you at a charter school or are you at the School District of Philadelphia?
The a charter.
You're at a charter. Um,
Yeah, so
one
it's
of
like different for us.
It's so you're someone at the School District of Philadelphia is assigned for McKinney-Vento to all the charter schools, and they're a great resource. Her name is Morgan. Um, and so I don't know if you have the contact information for all your SDOP office.
Yes, we do. My
Okay.
only reason for bringing up this question here was because we don't know if because of the situation that the parent is going through, they would go into foster. So that's where we're like,
Oh,
yeah,
so you're trying to
we're
plan
trying to
ahead.
work with mom, but we still don't know where like what the final
Okay.
decision is gonna be. So I just wanted to like see if this does happen to play out like how I'm thinking, would she remain our student because of the decision the parent took, or would she go to what out of the county because I think that's what they're going to decide to do, um,
Okay.
to like
I think
family members.
Yeah. I think whether or not the student enters care or is homeless through McKinney-Vento, I think it's just important to remember that they have a right to stay in your charter school if that's in their
Okay.
best interest or if they want to. So
Okay.
I would just be aware of that. So, I wouldn't. So, and remember what we talked about, we always kind of have the presumption of school of origin staying in their same school. So,
Right.
so I would just think of it that way. And so if the student does enter care, you should get a notification from maybe Adam at the Education Support Center or from someone else from Philadelphia about a bid request. And if they're experiencing homelessness, you wouldn't get a notification from a child welfare agency, but that would be
Right.
something that you would identify, and that again, you could always reach out to Morgan because I'm not sure of the charter school overlay in Philadelphia with
Yeah,
transportation
yeah.
considerations and things like
Yeah,
that.
I'm in contact with Morgan, but I
Okay.
was like
Okay.
trying to see like if they fall into foster care. I was just like wondering like would that still consider them?
Yeah. It
Yeah.
would be their rights are
Their
similar.
rights are still the same. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Just
Yep.
wanted to clarify that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. We're going to go ahead and close this. Mike Pizzari, CSC support, thank you so much. We appreciate your help today and yesterday. And bye, everybody.
Have a good day.
Happy holidays.
You too.